Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Between Now and Success. I'm your host, Steve Sandusky, and with me today is Ashley Murphy. Ashley, how are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And so you're actually running a couple companies here. So you've got Arete Wealth Strategists, which is your financial planning firm, and then you have the Global Financial Planning Institute, which is more of a training organization. So let's start with you describing to me what are those two businesses, and then we're going to dig into the planning side. And I don't mean financial planning, I mean like personal planning, business planning, because this is a great time of the year to be talking about that. And you and I do some work together, and I noticed what a great job you do and how thoughtful you are as you think about your personal planning and business planning. So I really want to dig into that. But let's start with Arete and the Global Financial Planning Institute. What are those two businesses?
Yeah, so Arete World Strategists Australia, we're focused on working with Australians in America and Americans in Australia. So I have a graduate diploma in financial planning in Australia. I'm obviously US CFP. I was actually an instructor at a few places. So essentially cross-border financial advice. And then with the Global Financial Planning Institute, that came, so what's that about? It's about training advisors, giving them the foundation training they need to work with international and cross-border clients. And that came about from the years of study that I did, getting that graduate diploma I was alluding to a minute ago, where I noticed that so many advisors have got clients overseas and they don't know the first thing about working with them. So they would write into a forum and ask about this or that. And people that may have had those answers just had no incentive to provide those answers. So I thought, we need to solve this problem. We need to start an organization that's dedicated to answering those sorts of questions.
So as we're talking here today, you're in Australia, and yet you have a US home base as well. So in the US, you're located where?
Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yep, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Been there since 2014, spent a decade in the San Francisco Bay Area before that. But technically, I have to say, my primary residence is in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
For tax purposes, huh?
Yeah, it actually is for tax.
Oh, is it?
It
Okay.
comes down to, it's so complicated. It boils to, Australia and the US have a tax treaty, and there's a tiebreaker provision in there as to where you're taxed. And it depends on the facts and circumstances, and the fact that I still own my home, I still have my business registered there. Yeah, you're spot on. It's for that reason I'm a US tax resident despite being here in Australia.
Okay. Now you're an entrepreneur, so you've got these two businesses. So how do you think about the two businesses in terms of allocating your time? How do you think about them in terms of, do they complement each other? Does one business feed off of the other? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. No, that is exactly right, actually. And there was a fantastic podcast, Steve, that you shared with me, where the entrepreneur that you interviewed in this podcast is talking about the common brand, the common theme. And I would be lying if I said that I had this master plan from the outset, but it's just organically evolved. I think the way that I saw the commonalities between them was, as I sought to do research to fill in the gaps, the known unknowns on the Arete side, it occurred to me that so much of the research that we were doing would be applicable more broadly. Separately, I'd had this idea for years, actually, to start the GFP Institute. And it was only when we got cranking on the curriculum for that I thought, wow, this research that we're doing elsewhere ties in and is perfectly adaptable. So there's the research effort. There's a PhD in tax and law whose stipend I sponsor. And so that's great, because it means I get to kind of steer the bit of the research agenda. Thankfully, he was interested in all of what I was looking at anyway. So it's a blessing there. The other thing is with more broad content production. So we've really turned the crank in the past month and 2 months with getting a ghostwriter on board who's able to produce a weekly blog post, monthly white, or maybe every other month white papers. And it's funny because the way that she edits that, I've given her instructions to say, please identify those paragraphs or those points that are GFP or Arete relevant. So there's SEO implications of this. You can't just pump out the exact same thing for different websites, unless you're the owner, and I do happen to be the domain owner of both of them. So that doesn't hurt as much, but also we are modifying them. So with the Arete, we're making it way more specific to that Australians and Americans in Australia. And for the GFP, we're addressing an advisor audience. So it's more generalizable. I don't want to, beat this Australian angle too much because people are working with all sorts of different country combinations, but where it's generalizable and applicable, yeah, we are able to achieve economies of scale with content and research there. It's also just, Steve, you know me pretty well, and I do my best thinking out loud. So sometimes when I get going, I get going. Another benefit has been really enhancing my reputation in the advisor community, which is great. I mean, it's flattering from an ego point of view, but also for referrals. So whenever a topic comes up about Australians, it seems like there's a Pavlov's dogs kind of reaction thing that happens in these advisor communities, and oftentimes I'll be mentioned there. So that's another benefit that's come about from the GFP Institute and Arete kind of having some similarities.
Let me digress for just a second here. The name Arete, what does that mean? Where does that come from?
No one's ever asked that in a podcast before, but it's a great one. I read it in a book called Betterness about a decade ago, and I'd had another name in mind. I was like, this business is going to be called Praxis Pacific. Definitely, like that works. But then when I read this chapter in a book, it just resonated with me. And I think actually by chance, this is a perfect lead in, maybe that was the intention. It just resonated with me because the context with which they were talking about Arete is derived from the word Aristotle. So it comes back to this ancient Greek philosophy of excellence of behavior, and being a man, a person who exhibits, these attributes. And I was like, that's what it's all about. It's not about it's about so much more than just money. It's about character. It's about improving the world, leaving something behind better than how you found it. And it deeply resonated with me. I happen also to have been a mountain biker pretty much my whole life. First race, March 1993. So coming up on almost 30 years of cycling. And so the French definition of the word is a rugged mountain ridgeline. So with the logo, we're kind of playing to that mountain ridgeline, which is funny because whenever I encounter a French person, they're like, "Oh, I get it. Yes, it makes sense. What you're trying to do there." But there's a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah. And my company is Belay Advisors. So yours is a ridge line and mine is belaying on a mountain. So, so we got that going. All right. So let's segue here into the personal planning and the business planning. And I know you're using a tool called Notion, which is popular with a lot of folks that listen to this. Tell me a little bit about what is Notion. Let's begin with that, because that's the tool I think you're using to track all of this.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one. It's a tough one to describe, but it's a paradigm shift in terms of word processing and personal communication. So Notion is a tool that we have used to replace a couple other tools. Mostly we've used it to replace Google Docs. And the characteristic of Notion that is distinct is its ability, well, I'd say maybe there's two things. It's the ability to have nested databases. So it's very easy to create a database and then have a database within a database. Now, that could lead to a lot of confusion for someone first hearing that. But the upshot of all of this is that it makes it extremely easy to organize information and disparate ideas and threads. So if we're talking, we might be having a coaching session, having a conversation about this or that, and literally with a keystroke, I can enter a command that creates a new page, and that new page has its own attributes, and then link it, and it's easily searchable, and maybe share that with some people and not with others. And so it's great. So it really turns it on word processing on its head by adding that power. The other thing that they've done is they're very, very, very open source. So they allow, you kind of have to see this to understand it, but they allow embedded objects. So you could embed a diagram, or you can embed a PDF in a Notion document. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean just a simple link, like we'll click and open another page. It means literally, if you have a spreadsheet from Google Sheets, you can see the full sheet open and interact with it within Notion. So you don't even have to change pages. You just see it right there. So I've got certain Notion documents with embedded diagrams from Whimsical, embedded PDFs, where you can read the PDF like right there from the Notion page, and embedded spreadsheets. So that's what I would say. And it's catching on too. Apparently Google Docs have added a few more commands with their @ symbol, and Microsoft has introduced a whole new program, which is thought to be a direct competitor to Notion. But they're really onto something. It's profound, and it's led to some major changes. We're moving. We're actually I'm not even sure if I've shared this with you, but part of the transition we're making in CRMs, we're also moving out of a project management tool to Notion to create an entire client dashboard, like a personalized dashboard where they can see meeting notes, they can see all the analyses that we've done for them. Everything is accessible to them directly from Notion. So we would set up integrations between Notion and Salesforce for task management. But it's a game changer in short.
And then what does this thing cost?
It's pretty cheap, actually. I think it's $6 per user per month. They've got a really clever freemium model to kind of get you hooked. So I think they allow up to something like 500 objects, which is quite a lot before you have to start paying. Of course, if you want to add team members and whatever, then that's going to be a premium feature. But it's been a rounding error. I think our bill from them for 6 or so team members is about $36 a month. So yeah, that kind of suggests it's $6 a month.
That's right. Yeah, if we do our math, hopefully we can.
Yeah,
all right. So let's talk about the personal planning here. So you've got in Notion, I think you have a couple areas here. You've got your personal planning, you've got your business planning. So let's start with the personal. You've got goals, dreams, and aspirations. So start walking me through the top line here. Where do you start as you think about your personal planning?
Yeah. So firstly, this particular document, and I can already get a feeling that people are going to ask for this, which makes me
it's personal nervous. And private.
Yeah, I mean, I could do that. I wouldn't be opposed to it, and I'd be happy to. This has really come about from about a dozen years of working on personal goal setting. And a lot of it is just tidbits of wisdom and exercises that I've found to be really powerful. So the way that this Notion document is structured is it's almost like to use an analogy, it's almost like an old-fashioned corkboard, where imagine a corkboard, you've got a note there about this thing, this other thing, and then maybe you've stuck a letter size page of goals that you've written on and printed from your computer, that kind of thing. So in Notion, what I've got is my energy entourage. This came from a speech that my friend from a different program, Charlotte Galecter, she gave a speech at a conference earlier this year, and she spoke about who are the sources, or what are the sources that I get my energy from, that I get my direction from. And so that's the first thing at the top of my goals, dreams, and aspirations, is I remind myself, oh yeah, meditation and state generation. I want to get in that optimal state in the morning. Second is go through my goals, review the goals so that my brain is primed to focus and get accomplish that day, that matters. The success shifter, that's something taken from the Stephanie Bogan's program. And it's essentially sort of basic habits, basic daily habits to stay in good physical and psychological and business health. So, giving yourself points for doing certain activities, so if you call a friend, if you call a COI, if you spend time with your kids or whatever, then you align points. So it's just reminding you to do those things regularly. Fourth would be staying in touch with a wellness therapist. And fifth, with a business coach. So those are my energy entourage, what I think of when I get myself in my best and highest state.
And then as you think about those, how consistent do you think you are with those? So let's take the meditation and state generation, for example. Do you have a morning routine? Do you have an evening routine? If so, how consistent are you? And can you share maybe what some of the components of that might be?
Yeah. I'm not as consistent as I would like to be because this transition to Australia has really thrown my goals off. And it's so funny how just small changes can make, it's like the butterfly effect, right? So because the sun comes up here at about 10 to 5 in the morning, my girls, they don't stay in their bedrooms till 6 a.m. So it means it's difficult to meditate in the morning is the challenge there. So the consistency of that has been less in Australia than what it was in the US. And the personal goal review, I don't do that daily. I was encouraged with the coach that put me on that pathway to do it daily, but I haven't found it necessary simply because I look at it so much and I see the same goals there, for long periods of time, that eventually I'm like, oh yeah, why am I not doing that? And I'll get really thoughtful and pensive about it. Like, what's the state of this goal? Why haven't I done that thing? And sometimes there's good reasons for it. Sometimes it's just laziness, or sometimes there's other reasons too. Like one of these goals, just to jump around. Actually, let's talk about two of them. Get a virtual reality headset. I could do that at a moment's notice. The thing is, I haven't actually found one. It seems like there's a technological breakthrough to come which is causing me to hold off. I'm like, I don't want to buy them. They all still seem so first generation. So I'm like, well, that's why I haven't done that. I want to get it when it's there, but not quite yet. Or another one is hire a laundry specialist. Yet again, actually, it was Charlotte as well who had that idea. Why not hire? If you've got the money to do it, money I like to think of as reframing it as potential well-being units. Let's think of how we can convert our potential well-being units into actual well-being. So what can we do that's actually going to move the dial and make a difference in our lives? Charlotte said, hey, I've hired someone who comes into my home twice a week and works for 2 hours and starts the laundry, hangs it out or puts it in the dryer, and then folds the other load that came from the few days beforehand. What a brilliant idea. People hear that and they're like, wow, that is so cool. Like, if I could afford to do that, I would do it. Well, I can't afford to do it, but I haven't done it because it just, I don't know, it gets bogged down there. It's like, maybe because I'm not the one in my house that does the laundry anyway. Perhaps that's why it's down there, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know, it just doesn't make it to the top of the stack, the things that will make the most difference with the time I have available.
Yeah, and what I find is that, and I mean, I'm looking at something here, my 3 words. So that's something that I've been doing for years now. On January 1st of each year, I come up with 3 words that guide my activities. And they're like these key words that are like, okay, these are the things I want to keep in mind over the course of the year. And I'm looking at one of these 3 and I see it every day. And I'm like, I still haven't done that, but I've consciously made the decision not to do it. It's not like I forgot about it, but other things have come up that have just become higher priorities. And it's like, I just haven't found the thing related to that word that I want to do yet. And so I'd rather wait until it actually gets to the point where I'm like, I'm ready for that. And it just hasn't happened. So on one respect, I feel bad about it. But on the other, I'm like, well, I've consciously decided I'm not going to do that because that's not hasn't risen to the top of the list yet that I'm ready to do that. So sometimes we kind of beat ourselves up over that.
Well, yeah, I think that there's foreshadowing as well. Like, you might see that this is going to be an important theme or topic for you, but in fact, getting through the minutiae of where you're currently at could take, some time to get through. But then when the appropriate time comes, you're going to be preloaded to act.
Yep.
Given what you've done.
Now you've got another section here, and I may mispronounce this, but it says PIF Life of Strategists.
Oh yeah.
do I have that right?
Yeah, that's right. So that's essentially, it's kind of a meditation. It's something I remind myself of. It's a vision. And that is, I say, when I'm 6 feet under, how do I want to look back on the life that I've lived? And it's an acronym. It's actually, I want to say, my vision, I want people to, at my funeral, I want them to say, or I want to feel that I lived a proud, interesting, and fulfilling life of self-expression, connectedness, centeredness, honor, integrity, striving, and service. So that's an acronym for that. And when I'm meditating every morning, that's what I'll do. I'll go through that and I'll be like, and really, this is the difference too in content versus experience, is to really stop and meditate and say, what does it feel like in your body to feel proud? What does it feel like to be fulfilled? What does it feel like to be interested and motivated by something? And it's funny how knowing that, like knowing what those feelings are, can lead to one having a finer distinction between, say, a cognitive goal that might sound appealing, like, if you want to build the leading firm dealing in some cross-border matter, well, it's nice to say that, but when you stop and think about it, you're like, actually, that sounds good, but I don't think that pathway is really, I don't physically feel interested in doing that. That sounds nice, like the goal attainment. Yeah, I mean, that would be great, but is that going to be interesting to me? Am I going to be engaged? Am I going to be excited and jump out of bed to do that? And the answer is probably no. So knowing what that feels like to you and recognizing that feeling is the value of that. And then as for the Setchus part here, the self-expression, connectedness, centeredness, honor, integrity, striving, and service, that they change a little bit depending on where I feel I'm at and in life and what's going on. But that's been, it's yet again, it's so important, when I look around and I feel how I'm feeling in a particular culture or context, I'm like, do I feel stifled, or do I feel I'm able to express myself? Do I feel connected to my community? Am I behaving? Here's a good one, actually. I was on my bike, sorry to maybe go into too much detail here, but I was on my bike, Steve, about 3-4 months ago, and nearly got sideswiped by someone. I was out and taking a road ride, nearly got sideswiped, and ended up in a shouting match with this driver. And it really threw me off for a couple of days, like just getting that angry and screaming and shouting. And I thought, if someone had taken a video of that and shown that to my daughters and said, that's your dad right there, was that honorable conduct? Is that something I'd be proud of? And the answer is no. And that really stuck with me. And so that's why I added it there. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? That's not in who I'm committed to being. And I always try and remind myself of that.
Yeah. And maybe along those lines, one of the questions that I've been asking myself here in recent years is, could I die happy tonight? And what I mean by that is, if I went to sleep tonight and I didn't wake up in the morning, would I feel okay with that in terms of the nature of my relationships? Do I have any unfinished business out there? Do I have anything that is unresolved? Do I have my financial situation in order so that my wife and family are taken care of? Do they know where everything is? It's all those things. And fortunately, I've been able to say, yeah, I could. The kids are launched, and everything financially is taken care of. So that's a good feeling. So that's another way that I tend to think about it, as well as could I die tonight? I don't want to. and
Yeah,
and there's no indication that I'm going to. So hopefully I've got, many more decades to go here.
But it's a great way to think about it, isn't it? Like, start with the end in mind. Like, where do you want to get to, and how will you feel? And you and I have spoken a little bit about this before. It's an interesting topic when we look at the Harvard Adult Development Study, or we look at the blogs and books written by palliative care nurses about people that have lived their lives, and what do they say they regretted. And according to the Harvard Adult Development Study, it changes, depending on your life stage, and people when they're 20s, and I was no different, I want to be rich and famous and successful. But then as life goes on, it's like, yeah, you know what, maybe the trade-offs that come with that aren't worth it. And furthermore, maybe it's not that important anyway. Like, what, yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that came out of that study, and maybe some other ones as well, is that people tend to regret more of what they didn't do as opposed to what they did do. And that was really a nod toward we got to get out of our comfort zone, and we've got to do those things that challenge us and that scare us a little bit. And maybe that's why I climb mountains, because that's definitely out of my comfort zone and always stretching me. But I always feel exhilarated as well when I'm out in the mountains. So that's fun. So let's dig into some of these other areas. You've got a variety of different things here. So I'm going to play the guest gets to choose. So take a look at some of these different areas here. And why don't you tell me which ones do you think are really important to you and why they're important to you?
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, what's really important to me? The values one, I think, is, so I should say I'm not a religious person, just to get that out there. But I think to myself, there's a lot of wisdom that we can gather from religion. And part of that to me is how I came to arrive at my values. Like, so here are the values that I want to practice, I want to repeat, I want to be mindful of in every action, in every moment, in every day of my life. And so I do look at that really, really frequently. And those my values, and they're the same company values. I think we've tweaked or added, not tweaked, like changed or compromised, but added one or two that are different on the company side. But my values are honesty, fairness, sustainability, but i.e. thinking of future generations, providence, which sounds religious. It's a word often used in that context, but I'm referring here to the dictionary definition, and that is providing carefully for the future, characterized by or proceeding from foresight and being mindful in making provision. It's funny, when I read that one, I'm always mindful of my life insurance and disability insurance. And am I saving enough for retirement? So my disability insurance agent likes me a lot because of that. Compassion, empathizing with the perspective of others, being holistic. I think that's something I'd like to return to in our conversation. Proactive and timely, efficient, informed, focused, and globally mobile. So that's the values section there. Did you want me to look at another section or go deeper on?
Well, I just want to ask a question here about the values. And I think a lot of us have gone through an exercise of coming up with our values, but I'm not sure that we all do a great job living those values and keeping those values front and center, and using those values as a tool for decision making and for how we go about our daily lives. So I mean, you touched on this a little bit, but anything else to add in terms of how you keep those front and center, how you use them perhaps as a decision making tool, in that when you're presented with different situations, different opportunities, where you could go left, you could go right, you could, go down this road, go down that road. Maybe you get back to the values and say, okay, well, if I'm true to my values, this is the decision that's real clear. Is it used like that?
It is, but I'd say there's an even more condensed version than that. And that's an exercise you and I recently went through about, my blessing and curse I've got is I come up with a lot of ideas And some of them are good, some of them are not so good. But the good ones I'll look at and I'll contemplate, and I'll say to myself, wow, that could work. That could be a real success. But then when I filter it, when I pass it through this values sieve, sometimes it might not pass muster there. And then with the next sort of step down, which just to get to that very, very briefly, if I was to look at a particular opportunity, I'd ask myself 4 questions. I'd say, is this opportunity going to is it simple, or is it going to add stress to my life through complexity? Is it portable? Meaning, is it going to bind me to a place, like signing a 10-year lease on an office building or something? Is it profitable? Is it going to make a material difference? But I actually have added something in addition to that, and it's personalized, as all of these should be. Is it something that I can own and sell? There's a control element there that's actually very important to me. And then, of course, the probability of success. And I'm sure we're all reminded of that great story of Daniel Kahneman, where Amos Tversky and he were tasked with developing a new textbook for some part of the Israeli curriculum, and asked an expert, hey, how long do you think this would take? And the expert said, well, really good producers might do this in 3 to 5 years. You're not a really good producer, so it's probably more like 7 years. And it was funny. I think he did end up doing it, and it did take him 7 years. So that sticks with me. So the values, I think, are very important. I do review those really frequently. I'd say several times a week. And it's important, I've arrived at them through great thought, great reflection, and I know that it's who I am. It's a North Star, it's a touchstone, it's whatever metaphor you want to use there. But it's whenever I find something that's not in alignment with that, then it just rubs me the wrong way. You and I were talking before the call started about different, well, we're talking specifically about people who prefer phone calls and like to commence a relationship that way versus via email, and the benefits of asynchronous communication. I had an email just earlier this week with a lady from a company, from a 401k company, and they've got one of these annoying email services where they email you to say, here's an email for you on our system and our server, and then you need another login, another username, because it's their way of making sure that you're not totally incompetent with your own information security. And I just wrote back and I said, I'm not doing this. We're moving it back to my email because many reasons. You can delete everything that's happening here. So there's a control element there that I'm not comfortable with. And then secondly, it's inefficient. It's like, don't presume that I'm an idiot and that I can't manage my own information security. So that's, I don't know why that was the first one that came to mind. That was just this week. We were just talking about that a minute ago, but it's always, I find it valuable to stay grounded in what my values actually are.
There's another piece that you have in here, and it's titled, "What is the story I have of myself?" And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because I think how we think of ourselves, our self-perception, our self-awareness is a big factor on how we're going to perform and how we're going to move through life. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you think about that and why that's important to you.
Yeah, so there's a couple angles to go here. One of the coaching philosophies, I guess you could say, that I've employed over the last couple of years was working with a hypnotist. And so, yeah, I've never told you that one. I worked with a hypnotist for a couple sessions, for maybe half a dozen sessions. And essentially that's how our brains are wired. We are wired. We have evolved to understand stories. There's content, there's emotion, and that just works in getting to your deepest, the deepest levels at which change happens. And so every morning I say this one, and it has become true, and which is interesting. Through my not teenage years, before I was a teenager, I was a bit chubby, but what's funny is that I was in the cross country team anyway, despite that. So I had this aerobic ability, but obviously some weight disadvantages there. And it wasn't until after high school, joined the army, lost a ton of weight, and found that I won every race from start to finish. I was like, wow, I actually really have this ability. It's just that I've been hampering myself this whole time. So I remind myself every morning, I'm a confident, composed, fit, and energetic athlete, and I eat and exercise in a manner consistent with this. Why do I have that second sense? I eat and exercise in a manner consistent with this because when I'm scarfing, down a pork burrito or something like that, it'd be like, this is not consistent with this story. Like what you're doing, inconsistent, doesn't feel good. No. But instead, when I'm having, breakfast of granola, with cut fruit and this nut mix thing that goes on, and it's all in accordance with what my nutritionist says, it makes me feel good. And actually, Steve, what's fresh in my head, and this is powerful to me at least, having moved back here to my hometown of Brisbane, just yesterday afternoon, I went for a mountain bike ride here at Mount Cootha. And I've lived away from Brisbane for 16 years, and I've dreamt and dreamt and dreamt of being able to ride a particular section. It's this long, long, long hill. And yesterday, sure enough, I rode the whole thing, and it might have actually been the first time I've ever done that without having to stop and take a breath. And so to just feel that vitality, that fitness is it's profound, because I'll tell you why. Even though you and I aren't sitting in front of each other physically, every single action that I take throughout the day, whether it's getting up off the ground, like physically, getting up off the carpet, or talking to someone on the phone or writing email, I am more confident when I feel good about myself physically. So it's this pan confidence that makes it worthwhile, that makes it such a priority.
Yeah, I'm down for that as well. I mean, I went through one of these self-assessment type exercises that's not well known it's not a super popular one that a lot of people would know. But one of the things that came out of it was like, my highest value is physical fitness and physical movement. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not surprising because I say to myself, well, I work out, I track everything. And so like this year I've worked out 9.3 days out of 10. And really the only days that I don't work out is if I'm traveling and it's hard for me to get in a half an hour or an hour long exercise because I'm on the road or at the airport or whatever. But basically I work out every day. And if I miss it, it's like, a lot of people say, oh, I hate to exercise. And I'm like, I'm totally the opposite, man. I love to exercise. Like this morning, you mentioned that you said it gets light at, what'd you say, 10 to 5 in the morning? Yeah. It's like, I'd love that. I mean, where I'm at, it's not, the sun's not coming, sunrise isn't until 6:30, and I'm chomping at the bit to get out on my morning hike. And so I left the house this morning at, I think I left at about 5:40 this morning, and it's like pitch black out, and it's about a 20-25 minute drive to my trailhead here. So I get to the trailhead, and it's still about 25 minutes before sunrise. And so I'm walking in the dark. I didn't have a headlamp on. And so I was like, I can't wait to get out. And so to me, it's like, I just love that type of exercise. And I've got other types of exercise, weightlifting and stuff that maybe not necessarily my favorite, but boy, I sure feel good afterwards. And just the confidence that it gives you of knowing I'm in good physical shape. There's a lot that I can do here. I think that, at least for me, it sounds like for you as well, that's a prime mover there.
And to me, it's all about removing the impediments to doing that, so when I would go or when I was moving to Minneapolis and choosing a gym, it was very important that the gym be close to my office, because I know that at 5 o'clock, when it's the end of the day. I might say to myself, man, I just want to head home and have a beer and, just relax a little bit or something. But if the gym is, if it's close, if it's easy to get to, then I'm much more likely to do it. So it's like reducing and eliminating those barriers at a subconscious level as well.
It's funny you should say that, because every night before I go to bed, I lay out my workout clothes for the next day. And so I typically go to bed before my wife does. So I'll walk into the bedroom, I'll get my workout clothes, I'll walk out of the bedroom, and I'll put them in the living room. And she's typically, watching TV there. And it's like this ritual where I put my clothes out in the living room, and it's become kind of funny.
And that's perfect, because when you wake up, it's just that bit easier to go ahead and do that and to take that action that's congruent with who you are and what's going to make you feel good.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you say, you've got to remove those barriers and make it simple. So everything's laid out. And I know the night before the exercise I'm going to do the next morning. So I've already figured out, okay, am I going to go hiking this morning? Am I going to do a treadmill workout? Am I going to do a weightlifting workout? Am I going to go for a bike ride? I mean, I know what that is, and therefore I get the right clothes out and put them out in the living room before I go to bed. So when I wake up in the morning, it's all there and I have no excuse not to move forward. So,
and I think having a robust alternative is helpful as well. I mean, what if there was a week of snow or rain or whatever coming?
Even better. And I'm weird like that. That's like, you laugh, and I'm totally serious.
That's where you and I differ. I'm like, I'm not even better. No.
Well, I'm not going to go for a bike ride if it's raining. I've done that before and wiped out, and that's no fun. So I know that, but like this morning. So I went for a hike this morning and it was supposed to be raining. I'm like, great. Because when I'm out in the mountains, it's going to be raining at times. So I want to make sure that I have the right clothes. So I had my rain jacket on with a hood in case it was raining. So, always testing out the equipment and everything. So, and in the wintertime, like, it's winter up here now. We've had our first snow. It's like, I love it when there's like a foot of snow on the ground and fresh white powder, and I'm out there with the backpack and I'm hiking through the woods. To me, it's like, that's awesome. Great. I'm a little strange like that.
Yeah. Well, I think financial planners also get a kick out of, like, there isn't a word for it, or not a word that I'm aware of, but there's a particular satisfaction in being really well prepared. If you're hitting that trailhead and you've got just the right base layer and you've got just the right beanie and you've got just the right boots, then there's some part of me that's like, yeah, I'm like extra motivated because I've planned ahead so well.
Yeah, no, that is so true. I mean, I don't want to experience something for the first time when I'm up in the mountains. Now, of course, there's an avalanche or, that sort of thing. I'm not going to be able to prepare necessarily for that, but everything else, the clothing, the food, my boots, all those things, I want to make sure that I've tested all that stuff in a more controlled environment when I'm out practicing here versus out in the mountains. So yeah, to me, that's part of the fun, is just all the preparation, the thinking through, the testing of equipment. To me, I get a kick out of all of that. In addition to the exercise. So yeah, we can geek out on this, I'm sure, for a long time. But let's anything else here on the personal side before we move to the business side? Are there any other little exercises or tools that you go through here that you think would be helpful for those listening and watching here?
Probably the last one to mention here would be the attributes of my optimal state. That's another thing I do in the meditation, is really think through, hey, this is the mindset that if I am wearing, if I have this, then I'm at my best. And that is not assuming right or wrong, staying detached, being open to possibilities, different interpretations of what comes your way. Curious as to why others think the way that they do, being relaxed, happy, playful, spontaneous, feeling centered, feeling confident in my story, which we just went through a minute ago, being patient and understanding, confident, etc. And it's when I'm feeling that, it's like those are just words that I went through, but when I'm actually primed my brain and body with that feeling in mind, then I'm ready to take on the day.
Now, how often do you catch yourself And what I mean by that, you gave the example here a little bit earlier when you almost got broadsided when you were biking and you were pretty upset about that. How often do you catch yourself like you have a certain reaction to something or a certain behavior, and then you're like, oh, this is not my optimal state, or this is not part of my values? Does it happen that quickly where you can snap into it and say, oh, this is not the way I need to be responding to this or thinking about this?
It's not as fast as I'd like, but I kind of think of all of the topics we've been speaking about here as being like skills to develop, or muscles to develop. It is something that I do catch myself on, but not immediately, So I recall earlier this week that I was in a bad state. I was feeling overwhelmed. There's too much on my plate. And I was able to identify that quicker and then employ a strategy for getting through that and for de-stressing myself and just saying, hey, we're going to get it done. It's the doom mongering that I think that in my case that sets in. It's like, oh, if I don't get this back to this client or don't get this thing done today, I'm going to fall behind and blah, blah, blah. And then it's the feeling of falling behind that's bad. It's like, oh, that means I'm a bum. I'm, going nowhere, just wasting my time. But then you say, let's take a step back. Actually, things have never been better. And the trajectory, the long-term, if we just look at the quarter, forget about what happens this week. Where are we going to be at the end of this quarter or the end of this year? Things have never been better. Let's remind, oh yeah, that's right. That's true. They have never been better. And you know what? Even if I don't get this thing done, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. What I like about what you just said here is that, yeah, none of us are perfect. We're all aspiring here. But what I like about what you've done here and what you've been saying here is you've got these tools, these mechanisms, these devices, I guess you could say as well, that help you move forward. And so rather than getting caught in a doom loop or just being frustrated or depressed for hours or days on end, you've got ways to snap yourself back into it by all the different things that we're talking about here. So I hope that's one of the things that folks listening to this will take away, is that by spending time thinking about these different types of tools and being thoughtful about them, that you can use them day to day, that when we all get into those inevitable funks or periods where we're frustrated about things or we're not reacting the way we want, we can fall back on some of these tools here and snap ourselves out a lot quicker than we might otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's flip over to the business side. So what would you like to point out from a business planning standpoint that you do that might be a little bit different than what you're doing on the personal side?
Yeah, it's a pretty similar setup. So kind of this Notion page with a whole bunch of different exercises and thoughts and statements and whatever that I've accumulated over the years. The main difference that I would mention here, I mentioned that filters to analyze opportunities. We went through that just a few moments ago. The Freedom Compass, that's a nice one. I think that one was from John Barron, the 4 quadrants of where you're working and where to prioritize where you spend your time.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that one.
So this is an exercise, got it from, I was on a Matthew Jarvis and a few other advisors, and I did a retreat to, what was it, Telluride last year, mountain bike trip. And we had John Bowen call in and he went through this exercise and he said, okay, you basically got these 4 quadrants that you could be working from. So there's in the first column of the quadrant, there's passionate about, and the next column is not passionate about. And then the first row is what you're proficient at and what you're not proficient at. So therefore the 4 quadrants are what you're passionate about and proficient at, what you're not passionate about, but you are proficient at. And then there's what you're passionate about, but you're not proficient at, and what you're not passionate about and you're not proficient at. So it's essentially, this is an exercise about allocating your time to really not only lean into your strengths that you're passionate about, but also understanding those things that will move the needle, that will make a material difference, that will move your business forward. And it's all about I think this entire Notion page, it's all about reprogramming your brain so that you're focusing on the activities that matter, that will move the needle, the stuff that matters. For years, I would get stuck in this, what I call it, email ping pong, just meaningless stuff that comes through in your inbox that doesn't really make a difference. Yes, it's got to be addressed at some point or another, but it's not activity that's going to make a difference. So for instance, today when I look at my email inbox, I wake up, and because I'm in Australia and the time zones are different, I wake up and I typically have 30 emails or so that are not read. And gosh, I got to get on them, got to respond. Well, maybe I do, maybe I don't, maybe I could put that aside. But what about onboarding with that new direct indexing platform that we're using, or getting the stuff done to facilitate the Salesforce transition? That is what I need to get done, not address some email about this or that or the other.
What do you think comes first, passion or proficiency?
Wow, what a profound question. I think there's two ways to answer that. There's on a daily basis, and then there's a life basis. I think I'm going to take the bigger question first here with the life basis. I remember coming out of university, I essentially studied how to be an entrepreneur. So I got bitten by the tech bug in the late 90s, and I thought, I'm going to come out and I'm going to be a CEO by 25 and take my company public, and whatever. Didn't happen, would you believe? But what I realize now when I look back is that I had no primary skill to really leverage. There was no idea that I could see that I could take these entrepreneurial skills and apply it to. And so that's where being a financial advisor has made a tremendous difference in my life, because I am passionate about that. I am proficient about that. And just briefly, the way I came to be an advisor in the first place was by doing the Jim Collins' 3 circles exercise from that book, Good to Great, which aligns those two areas, as well as an understanding of the business model as well. So passionate and proficiency. So where I'm at now, I think we're having achieved a certain degree of success. That's where I think I'm at a tipping point where I can afford to lean into that I'm a bit more passionate about. I also don't want to go too far from the edge. And I don't think it's wise anyway to go beyond what you're proficient at, even if you are highly passionate about it. And it's about those concentric circles, about finding opportunities that are right in the middle of the proficiency and the passion and the profitability.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask that question is I find a lot of people who give up early, and they want to be super proficient at something, but they're not willing to do the long-term work that's necessary to get to that level of proficiency. And so if you have that perseverance, you may not start out passionate about something, but what I find is that if you do something and it's something that's worthwhile and you have some interest in it, maybe it's like, this is the work that I do and I need to provide for my family. But if you stick to it long enough and you're consistent with it and you learn about it and you get really good at it, oftentimes you're going to find that the passion then follows after you have that proficiency. So, but I think sometimes a lot of people, they want to pursue the passion first and hope that, the proficiency will follow. And sometimes it does. Like, maybe I want to be a great golfer. Maybe I like to play golf, but I'm never going to be Phil Mickelson or Tiger Woods, so it becomes more of a hobby at that point. But anyway, I just thought I'd check with you and see. But ultimately, I agree with you in that we want to find where that overlap is, things that we're passionate about, things that we're proficient in, things where there's a need in the world for that service, where those circles intersect is certainly a sweet spot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you need to bootstrap and use different techniques at different points. Like as I came into the financial planning field, I was a little bit older. I was 28. Started with level 1 of the CFA, and that was super hard, to come. It's super hard at the best of times, but to come from from outside the field, to get through that required this vision of, I am going to be a planner, and to be a planner. That was very motivating to me. Like, I want to sit down and help people with their money, and this is what's going to get me there to do it. And I pursued that technical angle for years, maybe 6 years or so, 6-7 years. I was focused just on the technical side of financial planning. But since then, it's been a transition into more business operations, practice management as the focus. And yeah, it's remarkable the opportunities that arise because of the proficiency in financial planning. Yeah.
So as we get ready to wrap up here, and you think about all the different things that you're doing on the personal planning side, all the things you're doing on the business planning side, is there any caveat that you might give on this? Meaning, maybe you can get too hung up in all of this. Maybe you can spend too much time doing all of this stuff and not enough time actually doing the work, so to speak. So I don't know, do you have any thoughts or caveats as we think about the planning process that you need to watch out for, that if you were to do this could get you in a little bit of trouble?
Yeah, this is a marginal improvement, but the coach that I was working with that suggested really going hardcore with a daily ritual said exactly that. Like, you do this every day. And I was doing it every day for years, and eventually found diminishing returns to that. There are certain things that I do every day, like looking at the goals. Actually, is one thing I will draw your attention to. So I do a quarterly retreat, go away for a couple of days, just sit in a hotel and just work, do goal setting. And one of the activities that I do there is I ask myself, and I try and ask it in a variety of different ways to trigger different parts of my brain, I ask myself, what activities will most move the needle with these various businesses? And so with Arete, I say to myself, it is implementing my content marketing plan. Getting awareness out with the quality of that work is going to make the biggest difference. Refining our prospecting process, continuing with internal efficiencies. That's it. Those are the things that make the biggest difference. So that's how I try and ground myself, is understanding there are things to do on a weekly basis. Look through all of this every week so you don't lose touch. But more on a daily basis, go back to what are the shorter term quarterly goals, and what's going to move the needle, and see that the activities that you're executing are aligned with that.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point there. And I think you were touching on this in that one of the things that I think I'm going to be changing up here for 2022 is, I mentioned earlier, this idea of writing down my 3 words on January 1st of each year. And I do a podcast on that. And I talk about how I did on my 3 words for the past year and what my new 3 words are for the upcoming year. Well, I think for January 1st of 2022, I think I'm going to do something different. And I don't think I'm going to do 3 words for 2022. Instead, I'm going to do this filtering tool that you mentioned here and that you and I have discussed here in a recent conversation. So I want to mix it up. And I just want to make sure that I don't get stale. I don't get in a rut, because as I mentioned, one of my 3 words this year, I didn't do. And so maybe that's an early warning signal that maybe I need to mix it up a little bit. Maybe I need to try something different, which is what I'm going to do. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind is, yes, there are certain things that I think are fixtures. These are things that are rock solid, golden. I want to do these every year. But then there's other things that I might try for a year or 2 or 3 years. And maybe at that stage of my life, that stage of my career, those are things that make a lot of sense right there for something that I'm trying to get through or work through. But maybe I'm done with that. Now I want to try something else. So I think 2022 is going to be a year where I'm going to do something different and shake things up a little bit. So I think that's a good point to keep in mind as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, great.
All right. Well, Ashley, any final thoughts, comments, anything else that you want to share or talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
I did want to mention that the global mobile practice management consulting business that's getting launched. I did want to mention that. Very, very small operation, 3 or 4 advisors that I'm looking to work with, where I can add the condensed wisdom of the past dozen years to help them achieve the exponential growth that I've had in my own practice in the past couple of years. Yeah, I wanted to mention that, but
Yeah, well, tell me more about that in terms of if someone wants to learn more about that, what is it? How should they reach out or connect with you if they want to learn more about that?
yeah, the idea is, so from what I've learned from the GFP Institute about tackling an international cross-border business, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of very specific marketing approaches that aren't applicable necessarily to undifferentiated advisors. So we've all been hearing for years about the riches being in the niches, and that you're well advised to head down that angle and have a niche. Well, it turns out with niches, there's a completely different playbook that you need in order to really dominate your niche and be known in your niche. So that's what this Global Mobile Advisor program is about. We're talking about meeting twice a month, 90 minutes, run through a presentation, 90 minutes, one-on-one coaching to help implement the topics mentioned in the presentation. And if folks just want to email me at ashley@GFP, that's Global Financial Planner, GFP.institute, then I'd be happy to let them know about a webinar a series that we'll be running to let folks know more about that.
Excellent. All right. Well, Ashley, appreciate you being on the show here, and great connecting with you here on the podcast. And congratulations on all the great work you're doing there at Arete and the Global Financial Planning Institute. And we'll look forward to getting you back in the States here at some point and connecting here in person.
Sounds good. Yes, absolutely. Pleasure to be on your show, and it's an honor to be here and to speak with you as well, Steve.